We get to see Radiant Typhoon swinging back into action. We get to see Fairy Tale and, yes, the power of RB. Make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out more Oz content. We actually get to see Radiant Typhoon still being a deck that is existing within the meta. I think a lot of people kind of discounted this deck from still existing in the space, and honestly, I don't really blame people for that thought process, because this is one of those decks that you kind of look at and you're like, oh, hey, you lost probably one of your most powerful cards, which was Chant, but somehow this deck still managed to find its way into the, top 32 and was able to do a lot of very powerful things. Now, obviously, you still have the bare bones of the deck. You can still turn your extra deck into draw power, which is going to generate you some pretty good advantage overall. You have the Shield Bearer, which kind of replaces some of the holes within the deck, but now you get to play things like the Charmies. We get access to the Droplets. We get access to the Crown. You get all of the standard little applications for this deck, which is really good. But there's also another little piece down here that gets to come in. We get to see the Ritual Beast Boss Monster being a little slot card that you can kind of toss into this deck to be able to, detour your opponent from getting a lot of potential play lines actually established, which is kind of nice. I like this card because just having access to a generic Link 4 that can just kind of shut your opponent off is actually kind of something Radiant Typhoon actually wanted to have. You also do get to see we have a board breaker present. Yeah, we know. Being able to hand a Lava Golem over to the opponent and break apart their strategy is usually a pretty good thing. We tend to see kind of the power that's brought up with these powerhouse cards when they're actually able to be used correctly. So I think this is pretty good. Also, I have a lot of decent hand traps in here. The deck just took a consistency hit, but that doesn't mean that the deck still is not able to be viably played, because looking at what we've got here, it's doing pretty decently well. Woo, this was one of the decks that I wanted to see how the TCG would handle this. So now we officially get to see, oh, hey, how's Fairy Tale going to go? We have one Fairy Tale Snow in the TCG, which is enough to give this deck its entire lifeblood, which actually, you've done a good job. You basically turn this deck on. Obviously, we're missing a couple of cards to be able to say that this deck is going to act a little bit more consistently, but we did get access to Genia of the Ring, which this card, I think, it tries to patch up some of the problems that the deck doesn't have with the missing Magistus cards. Leave it to the TCG to print a consistency upgrade for the deck to try to patch up the holes that the deck is experiencing, which I think is kind of nice. Also, this means that the Lacrima of Light now has a top, which unfortunately might kind of start to make this deck a little bit more expensive as time goes on. I don't want to be like the bearer of bad news here and be like, wow, but I think the reality is, Metamorphosis and Fairy Tale Snow, two cards that this deck needed to really kind of up its consistency game plan is really good. Also No Last Wave from Another Planet down here, any of the funny shenanigans that this deck actually has. You just got to see absolute madness with building in, the Fairy Tale cards into the deck space, actually kind of creating a new little challenger within the room. So yes, this is awesome. This is what we wanted to see develop into the meta. We wanted to see a deck like this actually do its thing. I know a lot of people are very excited to get to play Fairy Tale cards. The Magistus package and this just goes so good together. It's crazy. Next up, we get to see RB. And this was something that I talked to Monolac a little bit before doing this profile. Monolac was telling me that Uka was an insane card for him. Uka says, if your opponent special summons a monster from the main deck, you can special summon this card from your hand, or if this card is one more special summon, target a face that monster opponent controls, special summon a monster from your hand or deck whose attack equals its own defense. Uka gives you access into Ray, so you can make a Sky Striker Link interruption during your opponent's turn. Not a lot of people are talking about Uka actually providing you with a tool set to be able to do this. And that's particularly interesting on the grand scale of tech choices, because that's just really, really cool to see. Also, I'm sorry, what are you doing here? Somehow, Consecrated Light has dug himself out of the abyss of Edison format and said, oh, I'm coming up to the modern era. Now, he's a floodgate. Neither player can normal special summon dark monsters or declare an attack. It doesn't negate the effects of dark monsters already existing on the field. Which, I mean, I guess you're making a trade-off with it, right? Like, if you're shutting your opponent off of some sort of mechanism, that's fine. We also do get to see, yes, this deck was relying on some of the train package to be able to, get those boards set up, to be able to, do what it needs to do. I think this deck did very, very, very well. We also do get to see the Crown. Yes, having access into Crown to particularly shut your opponent off of their key play lines is very, very good. Also, we get to see how stupid the extra urgent schedules are down here. You just played one in the main deck, and it worked out for Monolac. Good job. Next up, Malice. Oh, wow. After the restrictions that Malice got again, a lot of the community was like, no, Malice is dead. Let it go. Nobody wants to play this. Well, contrary to what you might think, Malice is still a viable deck, because the deck got 3 more Dominus cards. That's why we were kind of talking about Mitsurugi becoming a very real threat within this meta, because Mitsurugi also got 3 more Dominus cards. It's this combination of 6 interruptions that can just steal games. Like, Konami's kind of padding down some of the dark strategies here with a little bit more oomph to, be able to protect their game plan and actually, have these decks feel like, oh, hey, I'm able to set up, I'm able to have the form of interruption to be able to do its thing. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you is you're still choosing to play Malice in 2026 after this ban list. All right, you've lost your White Rabbit. You can still make boards, but if you think that playing this deck is going to be a super easy opportunity for you to set up and do things, that's not the thing anymore. You're not going to get that, level of protection that it feels like your deck wants to have. Also, keep in mind we have the power of Allure Darkness to be able to turbo you into your deck, to find you a lot more options. And it's a start, honestly. Like, we're getting places. Also, triple different dimension ground. Yeah. Also, no dimensional fissure present in this list. I don't know if they just felt like they didn't want to have access to dimensional fissure, or they just felt that triple DD ground granted them a little bit more resource management or generation. But when this deck gets its next form of upgrades, it's going to be a little bit better. Next up, oh my god, we have a DDD list. This actually caught me off guard. I didn't expect to see a DDD duelist actually creeping through the woodwork, but somehow this deck managed to find its slot into the top cut, which is pretty interesting. We are actually playing the contract with the Dark Eternal, which we're also playing more Dominuses. Guess what? This is another deck that got some massive upgrades due to, Dominus Spark being printed, which is great. Also, holy crap, man, we have cut down on the spells. 1 Dark Contract with the Gate, 1 Dark Contract with the Zero King. This is it now. This is actually really cool that, this deck has minimalistically cut down on a lot of its gas to be able to do things. Also, your side deck here, you have the Garua, the Mud Dragon, the Theseus, the Secretarian, and you've also got the triple Super Poly pushing on into the side deck as more option space, just to make sure that your deck actually can do what it needs to do. And while, still having all of the crazy access to all of the DDD monsters that, your deck is very notorious for wanting to have access to. But these are probably some of the most interesting meta challengers that you could honestly pick up and test right now. And seeing that, coming off of the YCS definitely had a lot of good surprises in it. We actually got to see a lot of structurally interesting challengers within the meta. And it obviously, shows that the meta is evolving in a pretty decent direction, especially if Rogue is doing this well. Cool Tune's just a bittersweet matchup to play into. But please leave a comment down below what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back here later today, guys.
Patrons!
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.